I really think we keep talking about them. They're super underrated for a band that's as big and as known as they are. I think they get like kind of homogenized with like third wave ska that people have forgotten about, or early 2000s pop punk. Less Than Jake, which we've talked about several times on this channel. Last time I think we talked about them and their influence in pop punk and how they were kind of ahead of the curve there. They're right in the curb with Ska-Punk. Like they're right
No, they're
in
like the Ska-Punk band.
yeah, they're in the zone in the same way. All the comments we made about how they're such connective tissue for like pop punk and what came later. Well, all that applies to ska as well. To all that third wave ska you're talking about and all that has Less Than Jake kind of at the top. And again, when we've talked about what these bands are. We haven't really talked about their songs as much. And
I was going to bring some of that up a little bit.
Yeah. Less Than Jake's songwriting, I think still, even when they did newer stuff, which they go in and out of the ska thing every now and then, but not much. Go see them live. You know, there's a dude with the horn playing right there, and they're doing their thing, and it's high energy, and it has all of the elements. I really think we keep talking about them. They're super underrated for a band that's as big and as known as they are. I think they get like kind of homogenized with like third wave ska that people have forgotten about, or early 2000s pop punk that people don't care about. And I think they're just a little bit more than that.
Dude, I would say that all 5 of my bands are underrated to a pretty significant degree.
Mm-hmm.
And you already know a couple of them. Shit, you probably could. I bet you could pick out. I bet you could pick out 4 of the 5, and I bet there's zero chance you pick out the 5th one.
Do you think then? And I think we're getting to this. So ska punk and ska in general, super underrated genre, right? Like,
no,
as a whole,
I don't think it
so?
is. No, I actually think it's very overrated. I think that there are very few bands that actually cut the mustard. I looked at a lot of lists, and most of those lists I didn't even think were full of ska punk. It was mostly ska bands, and most of those bands were so close to reggae that I'd damn near call them reggae. And all the ska punk bands, excuse me, it was the same like 4 or 5 that I've got picked out that came anywhere near my list. And it's funny because now that we're talking, I think my number 5 may have to get cut off my list. Because of my own argument against Sublime. So we'll talk about them in a few minutes.
So then it's funny then, is it a genre that really just belongs to people like us? Because if you're thinking about it, even the more we're talking about these bands, we're kind of disqualifying some of them as they're in, and we're trying to figure out what its influence. And as you said, we had the same issue looking up these bands where it was like kind of like, the herd was a lot thinner than we thought. And so maybe the top is really heavy, and then after that it just kind of falls off.
I think yes, it is very top heavy. It is a very top heavy genre. There's a lot of garbage in ska punk. Mm-hmm. But I do think that ska punk is for people our generation, because it was created by people from our generation. And as an example, today I did a Mustard Plug album review for their new record. Separate note, fantastic album. If you haven't heard it yet, really, really good. Go watch my review. It's like 10 minutes. That band has grown with me. When I was 15, they were a little older than I am, but they were writing music about being like broken up with, and they had some silly songs. And then as I got into my 20s, their songs started to change a little bit. And now I'm 41. They're like in their like late 40s, and they're writing more mature songs about right now, about this age. So I think ska punk as a whole has done that. And I think that ska punk will eventually die off. Bad Time Records probably doesn't want to hear that. They're a fantastic label, and I hope that I'm wrong. But I mean, out of that whole label, Mustard Plug's the biggest band on the label that I can think of. Catbite is a fantastic band, but I don't think they're a ska punk band. I'll bring them up in a minute. Kill Lincoln's really good, but like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know of a lot of, I mean, if Bad Time Records is the only record label putting out ska punk, is it really a genre?
Right.
If I was the only person putting out Texas hardcore records, that's it, nobody else but me. Is Texas hardcore really a genre?
Mhm.
No, it's a niche. And so I think ska punk will, in fact, it won't die off. It'll just be like a glowing ember. It'll just kind of be there, and you can get a little warmth off of it if that's your jam, but you'll never be able to thrive and cook off of it. You'll never be able to warm your body up. You'll still have to go out and find more things to keep it going.
Mhm.
That's what I think of ska punk, and I don't say that negatively. I love ska punk. I have for my whole life almost. I mean, uh, yeah, man.
But
Like
do you
it's an
do you
important
think
genre to me, but it is very much a smaller genre than people give it credit for.
yeah, and I think it has a little bit to do with what we're talking about and what's on your shirt right there. Is the further we get away from that time period, and that
Yeah,
like there's a reason why we it's funny, like why do we who like this music that's in a lot of ways it seems like antithetical to ska, right? From the outside. Like not spiritually, it's very similar to punk, obviously, but from the outside, kind of say like, oh, that's a different stuff than what these guys are doing and what those guys are doing. Well, why do we like it? It's like, well, because Tim told us to. And I don't mean that literally, like we're brainwashed. What I am
no,
saying, no, but what I'm saying is because of the visibility raised by associating the two genres together, people like us have found stuff that's even outside of a punk version of the genre, and it grows from there. Where would you pick up ska if it weren't for you had to be into punk first? Like other than if you were in like 1998 when third wave ska is
oi
growing.
music, dude.
How
Skinhead
do people
shit,
pick that up though?
skinhead stuff. It's a
Okay,
whole
but
different culture.
you're still going to be into something underground though. Is my point.
Yes, but it wouldn't have been the same thing. Ska could have existed without the stuff you're talking about. Is my point. Like I think that ska punk is a very specifically 90s thing, dude. Like I think that
Right.
like if you look at all the
But
great ska punk that came out,
where would you that's my point. Where would you get it after the 90s then? Like
that's my whole point. Is it's going
how
away. You're
accessible
not
is it
gonna
to
get
find?
it.
Okay, yeah, I guess we're on the same page there. But yeah,
So
that's
sort
what I
of.
was saying. Yeah.
It's going away. Like I don't think that I think that it wouldn't have existed without that exact like I'll get into it in more in depth when I start talking about my picks because I wrote some of this stuff down. But yeah, I think bands like Less Than Jake and the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones are the entire reason that this genre exists. Operation Ivy made a thing, and then other bands were like, "Oh, we can do something similar." Because Operation Ivy doesn't have horns, and
Mhm.
so that's a catalyst to being a ska punk band, in my opinion. You got to have some kind of horns, like Buck-O-Nine. You remember Buck-O-Nine?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like Buck-O-Nine couldn't come out right now and have My Town and be a success, but the song is still a great song. So you can't have that stuff exist right now without it being something from the 90s. If Kill Lincoln came out right now, have you heard Kill Lincoln?
No.
They sound like Less Than Jake, almost
Mhm.
exactly like them. And that's not a bad thing. I like Kill Lincoln. They're great. The guy that's I think the singer is the owner of Bad Time Records. Like that band's awesome.
Mhm.
Uh and I'm not talking shit. But it is they sound I mean, when I first heard them, I thought it was a Less Than Jake song. Like vocals and everything. I was like, oh shit, Less Than Jake. And then I was like, what is this? I didn't know this band existed. Um, there's a small little niche group of kids that really want ska punk to exist. And so for that reason, it will. But
Mhm.
will it ever be relevant again? I don't know that it was very relevant to begin with.
Yeah, well, it's of all the things we talk about that were a fad, I think that one is like the most fad-ish of everything that was a fad. Because everything else we talk about lasted just a little bit longer than where ska is almost people can pinpoint almost the year and stuff when ska was big. And then ska what always and where I was kind of going with it earlier is anything that has the ska elements just gets transposed into other types of music and doesn't get like coded as ska anyway. And
Yeah.
that's really where I went. Like where that's why I say, yeah, maybe you'll find it through Oi, which you're doing a lot of digging to get to Oi, then until you get to ska, and then it stays,
Wait,
in your head.
what?
You
think
don't
you do a lot of
no,
digging?
yes, it's not like Oi is the most accessible music for someone to get their hands on, just right out
Neither
of
is
nowhere.
punk rock or ska, in my opinion. I don't think it's any harder to get a hold of than punk.
I think punk's much more accessible. Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, you can get through to Oi with two bands that are far bigger than almost any punk band ever. Dropkick Murphys, Flog and Molly. Those two bands, gateway bands into Oi music. Absolutely.
Yeah, but you can just watch like TV shows and hear punk songs all the time and catch on to stuff. You can go
That's
to
my
like
point. Is you
department
can
stores
hear
and
those bands. those two bands will be in any TV show just as fast as punk. Okay, well that depends on what your definition of punk is, because I disagree with that. I don't think any real punk is in TV shows.
But the point is, you're gonna catch on to it, and that's how you would have caught on to something like ska back in the day, which there's no catching on to that. Anyway. I'm using a bit of an outdated metric of TV shows. I get that, but
maybe, but like I don't know.
But I think you're gonna
get.
I think you're gonna get something more punk rock adjacent to be like a TikTok trend before you might like something that's Oi related. I guess that's maybe a more modern way of.
Yeah, maybe. I guess I don't really think either of them would be TikTok trends, and I think they're very, very similar. So I don't really separate them very much. So I don't know. It's just weird because like